All right, we'll call to order this meeting of the finance committee.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The information that I was asked to gather today was concerning the daily rate for the HRAs, full-time bill support. That's the information I bring in, so there's help. So 2 years ago, we presented for those two classifications, for daily rate of $90 a day, they were $120.
Were they both at 90?
They were both at 90. So that was a 33% increase in their daily rate. That we added to the budget for those positions to be increased. That was to bring them in line with other folks who were making $15 an hour. So we were at $15 an hour for them as well. HRAs came about through ESSER funds when we first had the pandemic, or unassisted, unlicensed assisted.
Just sort of good.
So we added those positions as well as the full-time adult supports. Those have been in place, but to have equivalent daily rates for those that position was increased as well. We have worked very hard in the past few years to decrease the number of full-time adult support positions. We have 131 full-time adult support positions, 26 HRAs this time. Another thing to note was that adult supports and healthcare assistants are both offered benefits. So they are in the retirement system. So once they get their 8 years, they can be vested in the retirement system. Are eligible for health insurance, leave days. They're eligible to enroll in the sick bank and entitled to pay parental leave if they have that. They need that benefit as well.
Do they get the sick and 3 personal days?
8 sick and 3 personal.
8 sick and 3 personal.
I have a question. So you said you were working to reduce the number of support personnel?
Full-time adult supporters.
Okay.
Just the need had, we're doing a better job of the IP teams identifying this students who are really in need of that. And if there are multiple students in one building that perhaps don't need it for every single class time, then they're able to use one full-time adult support maybe for 2 or 3 students. Can't speak fully to that, but
Yeah, I mean, it's still typically 1-to-1. They're trying to do a
At
good
one
job.
time,
They're
yes.
trying to do a good job of determining if that's the true resource that the student needs. I will tell you, we're a growing school district, and the number of those students proportionately is increasing as well. So whereas we're trying to do a good job about making sure that's truly what the student needs, it's still gonna be a kind of a trend. Yes, it's.
I've worked in the special needs classes and
Yeah.
I, I think I've even served as an adult support sub. And so the children I encounter, a lot of times they do need it, but it doesn't mean I have met all of them. And some of them may only need it for certain classes. Right. I was just wondering if overall you just were working at how to cut this.
oh, no, I didn't mean that. So
Okay, all right. No, that was just my interpretation, to clarify.
good question.
Thank you.
So did you have the information for a possible stipend and what that cost would be and what we could possibly look at doing? I knew all that. I knew that we increased their salary and we reduced adults.
So, the calculation for a 4% flat increase for that would be $1,000. You with benefits.
Right, so that's just a salary increase. What about like,
That's just a 4%, just.
did we look at possibly a like stipend, I don't want to say bonus because that's not, it'd be more like a retention stipend, I don't know what you would call it, like maybe or whatever it would be, and what that total cost would be.
We didn't calculate that. These two positions are considered, they're not full-time.
Your
That we included that right on the daily rate, so they weren't included with the retention bonus.
Right.
Didn't calculate that, I mean.
Yeah, I think, if you don't mind, I think the goal and kind of what we're looking at is when we talked about our raise, on our website, it said a $2,400 raise for teachers reflected on all steps and certified salary scale and a 4% raise for classified support staff and administrators. And then there was also a Facebook posting that shared all classified staff, and in the meetings, we said, everybody's getting something. And I understand that our daily rate employees weren't kind of part of that and why. But I think that that created some confusion in what the expectation was versus the reality. And so I think the goal is maybe not necessarily, we don't have to necessarily do the 4%. That is something to look at, but what are other options to say like, hey, we appreciate you, we value you, we want you to know that that wasn't an intent to like have you overlooked, but also like that wasn't necessarily. So I just wasn't sure if you had like tiered approaches other than the 4%, like maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
because I think I get what you're saying. It's if we do the 4%, I mean, I think we need to have a conversation in the next budget cycle about whether or not these employees need to be, yes, included in that. But that's not necessarily what we want to do right now. But so I think it's more of like addressing the information that we put out last year that definitely misled. Obviously, it was not intentional on our part to mislead, but it did mislead. So we're trying to address that. So it really wouldn't be necessarily increasing them by 4% at this point, but instead doing some type of stipend to address that language. That
So, and I think next year too, and talking with Scott and Kenneth both, is to be probably very clear, because even the 4% wasn't 4% for everybody. It was a range. You want to speak to that?
4% was the average, more so than everybody guaranteed 4%. So some people got less than 4% overall. Some people ended up more than 4%. It really kind of depended on where they were on their scale
Yeah.
and whether or not they're step, and if there was a COLA involved with that as
Yeah.
well. So
COLA was the
Very.
flat 2%, and then the step was the difference, and we are working towards having all of the steps be the same.
Well, so if you're, so, and again, when I've done this in the past with bargaining, whenever we do an increase, we won't consider, and this is for the board to understand, we won't consider the step increase, which is the COLA. We will only, when we announce it. So if it's a 2% increase or 3% increase, that's all we're gonna say. But from here, but understanding that unless you're at the top of the scale, that really means a 5% increase. But that's just a guaranteed if you're on a scale. That's why this past year, we tried to create and solidify all those scales so that there is a COLA increase in between each one of those. We shouldn't consider that when we make the announcement, because not everybody's some people are at the top of the scale, so they won't get their COLA increase. And one of the things with the scales we're trying to do is make sure they are equal, from step to step.
Step is the one that's the 1.63%
Right,
between.
right.
But the COLA will affect even the people at the top, because that top number will adjust by the COLA. But they won't get a step,
Well,
so they'll just get the flat.
it's all about how you set, you announce that.
It's a little
because-
confusing.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be, we shouldn't
You're
talk
not like a
about,
finance person.
yeah, you shouldn't talk about a COLA. You just talk about a percentage increase, period. Shouldn't,
But that's the COLA is the cost of living increase.
I get that, but that's the step. That's what the step is also supposed to be. So whatever the increase is, it should be a flat number. Listen, I mean, I know I'm not making this up because I've done this a lot. And so we have the scale, and when you do the increase and we commit money to the budget, if we do a percentage, it's a percentage, period. Based on whatever monies we have available.
We'll just have to call it the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And you have to allow enough time so that you can really explain, because that, the comments that I got, that they felt as though, for lack of a better word, I just say they were deceived in thinking and believing certain things were going to happen. And then a follow through wasn't with, okay, if you have questions, call. They called and technically they still didn't get clarification after what was happening. And then this time when people are expecting special finances and they have options, we don't want them to feel as though we're being deceptive, which I'm sure we were not. But it was clear to us, well, not clear to us, but was clear to those that were doing it. So, you know how sometimes you're trying to teach a concept, you got it, you don't understand why the audience doesn't get it. So we just have to have enough time to say it more than once, have it addressed at every level, so that clarity is.
I think the biggest thing is it was that all classified staff and everybody gets something. So when we're relaying what we're doing in the verbiage and communicating that out to our people, we have to be sure that we're capturing that properly too, because I think that that created hurt feelings, because then there was, it was almost like we said something, but then that what was received was different. So whether intentional or not, that's what happened.
And it did say 4%.
yeah.
Even if that was the average, that's fine, but that's not.
That's not what
It says
Say
4%.
that.
Yes, so I mean, I can see how that would,
I also want to go back to, that's why we have to be very cautious about not addressing gaps in off years with individual groups. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, we put a lot of money into those two groups the previous year. So we need to make sure that we stay very focused on that, because the last thing I want you all to do is to be stuck with a certain area saying, well, they got this, what about? That's why when we make, these recommendations, it really should be across the board for all groups. We have classified staff, certified staff. And again, last year was I felt like last year was a struggle, unique year, because we were trying to put us in a position to be consistent moving forward.
That's what I was gonna just say to what you said, is I feel like normally that wouldn't be the case. We're not gonna target one area and one
Right.
area, but I think we had some large disparities
We
that
did.
needed to be addressed
some areas that hadn't been addressed, they didn't really.
to get us to a place where now we can do a consistent, even across the board thing and make sure it's communicated properly with what's happening.
Well, and one of the things we did was we tied the ECA and co-curricular scales to our teacher scale, so that didn't go, because typically that goes for years. People forget. Like, oh my gosh, we haven't adjusted that scale. And it's not unique to here, but unless it's indexed like that. So,
So my concern with the 4% is I think that's something we have to address as a board in a budget cycle.
yeah,
And I don't think it's appropriate for us to go ahead and now revert back to that 4%, but I also don't think it's appropriate that's not the word, I don't think it's fair or right to ignore the fact that there was confusion in the communication, and there are people that signed on to this job with a certain expectation of increased money that they now aren't getting. And so can we do that 4%? Unlikely. But is there something we can do to right or wrong, so to speak? Like a happy medium, like we appreciate you and understand this isn't what you thought, but we value you, And that's kind of what I think the intent of the board holding this meeting was.
I'm a big course of action person. And I think what would be prudent to do is to provide you with 2 or 3 courses of action with a fiscal impact
Yeah.
of what it would cost, and then you choose. Honestly, to me, that's the simplest way to do this. But understanding then moving forward, I think we won't run into this. We shouldn't run into this again. Now that we have our scales set, I hated to say that too much, but we kept saying, this was a reset year, a reset year, a reset year as we try to get people on scales. So now when we announce jobs, it has the scale, associated with the announcement. You can go to our website, you can look at the scale, you know what your range is, so a lot more transparent. This is just one of those things that, not to say correct or wrong, but just trying to improve. I just think we give you guys 3 COAs and you choose the one. We'll put them in order.
One.
Always have one be do nothing. Another one will be 4%. Another one will be a stipend.
I wouldn't say the 4%. I would maybe do tiered stipends. I just don't think it, that's just something to.
Well,
think you
I
can
mean,
give
that's
the
why,
choices
that's why I
and
give
then
you
we
a
can
choice.
decide.
Yeah,
We
you
can
can see that.
discuss and-
You can see the financial impact and then you can choose.
One
One's
thing
gonna
about
be a
the 4%
residual.
though is that we address these group to say that you get 4%.
Yeah,
The other folks who didn't get 4%.
Well, and that's why I'm trying not to get hung up on the 4%.
4%.
What I'm
Well,
getting hung up
let's
on
do two
is
different, then let's
Two
do two
different
different
stipends.
pieces of stipends.
possibility,
Yeah.
one time
Yeah.
for this year
Yeah.
as a courtesy and a thank you for understanding we're not always gonna get it right all the time. You know?
And we heard you. We understand that your feelings were heard and different things were communicated in a way we didn't intend. And so we're going to do something. The other thing is, and I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but I think, did you all have a question? Did we have a question that says your value to what you presenting? Because there was one person in particular, well, some people were very offended. Like, I don't have value to what I'm bringing to the district. And it had something to do with the value. And I try to recoup what that word was so I can bring it back. So we don't want to use terminology that kind of cause people to think that they have no value or they don't have the same level of value. Okay, well, that's the terminology that was said to me, but I'll have to make sure I find that correct. Some reason that ringing in my head, but I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think the whole thing is just a learning. We were trying to do what we could do. And if mistakes were made, we're trying to correct.
Yeah, I just, think we made a valiant effort.
Oh, yeah. And there were a lot of people appreciative, but of what we did, but we also have to look at those that were feeling.
Yeah.
Into their feeling.
So 3 COAs then, and honestly, I can work with, finance and personnel and I can send those to you. Just be on the lookout for them. I know we don't meet until, later in October, but I'll get them to you pretty quick. One of your Friday, soup updates. And then it'll be in your board packet the next time. Because you'll have to vote on it.
We're talking about these two groups, the full-time adult supports and health systems, those two.
Anything else on the daily rate employees? All right, moving on to the update on impact fee studies. I guess we have,
You're up, Rhonda.
If you recall back in February, county council approved to have a impact fee study completed by the county, and they did that solicitation. They have a vendor. That vendor has returned a draft copy of the impact fee study, and we just wanted to make you aware. We right now have outside counsel advisor taking a look at it as well, but on October 10th at 4:00, it's going to be presented in a final draft to the planning commission. And Dr. Robbins and myself plan to be there. What will happen at that meeting is the planning commission groups study that they will recommend to county council to adopt the study, and of course that will result in an ordinance. There'll be 3 readings of that, so, and I've just put it to this. But just to give you an update of that will be coming up.
What's that saying? Hey, what's that saying?
We get that feedback back from our folks. Sure to distribute that to the
Yeah.
members.
I guess, yeah, still building thousands of homes a year. Can't get the older ones, but newer one, new ones, right? So, yeah.
We can get some of the ones that haven't been built yet.
Okay. Still in planning.
Depending on what the agreement said, on whether they said that they would not consider impact fees, future impact fees. If they did not note it, then we can go back, even those that are currently developing. It just really depends what the wording was in the agreement.
Once it's passed.
Definitely, yeah, we got the East Evanston Middle School, both the funds from impact fee. So we can get a school every 10 years.
Looks like
Take
it's.
on the yeah.
It was only half the school.
If we have a school every 10 years, we'll take it, yeah,
Gotta use all the things to bring it together to build a school.
for sure. All right, any public comments? Very none. So motion to adjourn. Holidays, yes, second.
Second, I mean.
Second. Thank you, Jared.